Hi, this is my video for the chapters of chapter 4 and chapter 5, 6, 7, and also the CES pages. So first, I would just like to start out with the display theory. And one of the biggest principles that I got from this theory and um, how I will weave it into my teaching is using stories to teach a principle. I think giving examples to illustrate a point is one of the best ways that we could help someone relate to what we are teaching them. And giving examples and telling stories helps or allows you to personalize what you're trying to teach and allows the participants to be able to relate to what you're saying. And they may think of stories themselves while you're giving examples, and then this could spark them to share their own personal stories, which would benefit everyone. It also makes the workshop more interesting when or at least I believe, when you hear personal stories. So it could help create interest with the participants. So they're not getting bored or it's not getting redundant. I think that the participants can bring just as much, if not more, valuable information to the group because everyone has their own experiences that they can contribute that could add to the discussion. Kind of relating back to what I was saying before, personal experiences is I believe, very helpful. And I think it's important as an instructor to make sure that you facilitate and create an environment that allows people to feel comfortable to share their own personal stories and their thoughts on a topic. And I don't want to deny anyone speaking their own thoughts, but I think it's also important to make sure that you go through your lesson plan that you have planned and too much time on one particular topic because it can get easy to get sidetracked, especially if the participants are volunteering information, and sometimes they can get sidetracked and then it can kind of derail the lesson a little bit. So I want to make sure I encourage environment for people to share, but also make sure that we stay on topic and that if we need to move on, that I will move on so I can make sure to cover what I feel is important to cover in my workshop. Another principle that I thought was important taught from the book that I appreciated and will implement in my family life education is demonstration. I really like the idea of giving the participants scenarios about different things and I guess different scenarios and see how their reaction would be in those certain type of situations. A lot of times when we have a discussion and how we say how we were going to respond is not always what maybe our initial reaction would be. So in a scenario like situation, I feel like you're more likely to give your initial reaction to something. And I know this would be great in a group setting because it allows the person to reflect on what they normally would say and gives them time to reflect and see if there's anything that they could change to make things better. I think it's important to always try to keep the Holy Ghost with you because that does have a huge role in learning and teaching. And even though sometimes our audiences might not even be LDS, that doesn't mean that we can't be guided by the Holy Ghost and that the Lord doesn't want to inspire us to say something or to do or share something to the people that we are teaching. Because we are still influencing, even though they're not LDS, they're still families and they're still people that have important information and that the Lord may want them to hear a certain thing or to reflect on a certain thing. And so you are still an instrument in the Lord's hand. And so if we keep the Spirit with us, we can be guided and we'll be able to give the information that the Lord finds beneficial to those people. Something that I learned from teaching in a church setting, because I've taught in Relief Society, I've also taught in gospel doctrine a couple times. So I've had experience in church settings on teaching. And one of the things that and also not only teaching myself, but also participating in lessons, is how important it is to respond to someone's comment. I know sometimes I will do this, and I also will see this myself, is someone will make this really long comment that's really good and very informative, and sometimes it's, this is a personal story even, and the teacher will respond with, okay, thank you for sharing. And I think that's a missed opportunity to expand on what they said, because when you expand on what they say and also grab the principle that maybe they're trying to convey, it lets them know that you were listening and that you actually really do appreciate and we're trying to fully understand what they're trying to say. And so other people will see that as well. And I feel like, will probably be more comfortable with sharing. And so that's something that I want to work on myself and make sure that I implement that in my workshop and when I teach my lesson. I definitely want to make sure that my workshop has plenty of discussion. I know that I will have a lot of information to share, but like I mentioned before, there's a lot of information that I can learn from other people as well. And leading a discussion can allow the learners to help clarify their thinking by making comments. And I want people to feel comfortable to share what they feel, but also make sure that they don't wander off from what I was teaching. Like I mentioned before, I want to make sure I guide the discussion and make sure we stay on topic and do so in a way that doesn't scare people from volunteering or make them feel comfortable from raising their hand. And I believe that it's important. One more thing, I believe it's important to be sensitive to all different kinds of family backgrounds. When we do our workshops or when we do lessons, we need to make sure we know what our audience is, and so that we can be sensitive to who they are and where they come from, because different families and individuals will have different backgrounds, and different families will have different values and priorities, especially based, say, on their ethnic background. So I believe it's important to recognize what kind of families that you'll be dealing with so you can redirect or teach in a way that they can relate and won't be offended in any sort of way. For example, my workshop is mostly going to be white, middle class, LDS, young, single adult women. And so I would take that group and I would teach in a way that they can relate and that they can understand. And the way they really understand would probably be different than if I were to teach middle-aged married men. So it's definitely important to recognize that. So those are just a few things that I gained from the last few chapters. And yeah, so thanks.